back there move up a little bit closer, because unfortunately we don't have a microphone. So we're going to do our best to have you hear what we have to say. I'm also recording it so that we can use it for different purposes. I've been asked to moderate this evening's event. My name is Zola Rose, and I am with an organization, social enterprise called Common Ground. I set that up many years ago to be able to research and provide solutions to the many housing problems that we have in this country. So I've got tons of research, and this is an interest of mine. And I myself live in a tiny home, so it's quite relevant to me. I was asked a couple years ago, about a year and a half ago, to go to Whakatane. The council was having a very similar issue with the community, or the community with the council, and they did something similar to have a event to hear the stories of what's really going on for people, and to be able to encourage the council to work with the local community to come up with solutions. So Whakatane is already on this mission. It's the Whakatane Housing Action Reform Enthusiasts that have formed a group to be almost like a go-between between the community and the council. So they've been having a few forward steps, so that's good. We've got some precedent in the country of a community coming together to keep the council sort of, I guess, honest about what they're doing and to have them come up with solutions. See more about that. Yes. There's also, if you don't know, the New Zealand Tiny Home Association has created a local government working group to be able to investigate policy solutions, and they have come up with an idea of what they propose for all the kids. So it's meant to be a countrywide solution for local government to be able to address the tiny home. They are just having one proposal on the table at the moment, and it's a slow-going process, but it does exist. We have a staff member from Tasman who's sitting on that local government working group with the New Zealand Tiny Home Association, so that's good news. And I was also asked by TDC to investigate policy opportunities for tiny homes. I wrote them a proposal with how I would go about doing that research, and at the same time that granny flat legislation was proposed and were submissions going through, and TDC put that whole research on the back burner. So I have an idea of what we could do about this, but I'd like to be paid to be able to do the work to make the policy recommendations, etc. Because I can't work for free. This is my livelihood. So that's kind of stopped that being able to move forward, but I'm hoping TDC, after perhaps hearing what the community is struggling with and is challenged by, that maybe they might be moved, or we can move them, to be able to consider that proposal again. And just to say, if it's of interest to you in terms of wanting to live, maybe sharing land with others, where you can have a longer-term solution to a tiny home, where you can put a tiny home. I'm hosting an event on the 24th of November at Riverside in the afternoon called Cooperative Living, so looking at models that have worked in other places, but it's also networking, so that if you're looking for other people to maybe do a project or land share with, it's a great place. We'll have some structured networking so you can meet other people and we can keep these conversations going. So it's not all about tiny homes, but it definitely would be a part of that, which is a lot of people looking for land are in tiny homes. So that's about me. If you wanted to check out Common Ground, it's commonground.net.nz. I have a podcast called Homefulness, and hopefully this will get edited and then be aired on the Homefulness podcast as well as the YouTube channel, and we might do some other things with the recordings as well to get it far and wide. Okay, now I'm going to introduce our presenters who are going to be sharing with us their perspective on this tiny home situation, circumstance. Okay. Okay, so we've got Trindy. She's an elected member of Tasman District Council. As a councillor, she sees her role primarily as an advocate and voice for her community. Housing's always been a passion, and she wants common sense solutions to real world problems. Given New Zealand's abundance of land and natural resources, housing should not be an issue. She looks forward to meeting and listening to your concerns. So that's Trindy. She'll be our first speaker. Next we have Rick, I believe you're presenting next. Did I get that right, or was it Nick? Was it Nick next? Okay, Nick is next. So I didn't put this in an order. Nick fell victim to TDC legislation in 2019. He was found to have breached the Building Act by buying a tiny home-style caravan. This started a journey of discovery of wrongdoing, misquoting of legislation, and even lies. A story in the paper brought out many similar or worse stories to his attention, so he decided to run for council to change the culture of what he saw was just simply bullying. So he's currently with the Motueka Community Board, serving there. Next we have Rick. Okay, so we've got Rick Benjamin, a landowner with land in Motueka, currently have 5 tiny homes on his 87-year-old mother's land. They've been served an abatement notice because tiny homes have been occupied for more than 8 weeks and breached the Tasman Resource Management Plan. Request is for a resource consent to be applied for. Is this yours separately, my wife, and did you want me to read that as well? I can read that piece. Yeah, there you go. And then we've got Christine here. Christine and her family live in an off-grid property in the Moteri, share their land with a lady in her tiny home in exchange for a helping hand on the land and a step-grandmother for their children. Council laid a complaint about the tiny home, which ended up in the Environment Court. The decision currently is pending appeal. Christine believes that the tiny home on their land is not fixed to the land and does not therefore need a resource consent. The main issue for her is about a continuous lack of transparency, accountability, as well as disrespect for privacy rights and her dealings with the council on this matter. She wishes to see a meaningful engagement on the issue for the benefit of the whole district. So our format is that we'll be going presenter by presenter, and I think we'll just open up for a bit of Q&A per person, and then we'll move to the next person. And then after all 4, I think we'll take a bio break, and then we'll resume for any other Q&A, or maybe we might have some other things that come up that other folks in the room might like to discuss. We'll see how part 2 goes. If you need to use the loo, it's out this down this hallway, and then there's male and female on either side, or non-gender or whatever. I think that's it. There's water here if you need. Come on up. Welcome at any time to get up and help yourself. And then in the break, I think you might be able to order something, or no? I'm not sure. Not sure. Coffee cake. Coffee cake. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we're ready to get started. Yes, let me just move that microphone as close as we can to your...
Can you move it closer on your
Okay, there we go. Yeah, okay.
So good evening. As I've already been introduced, my name's Trindy. Some of you will know me as Councillor Walker, and I lived in Motueka since 2010, and I've pretty much been involved in my community, our community, since then, in a social service aspect role, and came to find out firsthand what it was like to actually find a place to live, a place to call home here. And the reality is, it's actually quite a challenge to find a place that you can actually turn up every night and feel safe and secure in. And this started my venture. First of all, I was with the Salvation Army. Some of you will know my face from those days, and others will know me just because I've been a passionate advocate to try and help bring some common sense into what is a human right for someone to have a place called home, a roof over your place, that's secure and not under threat of being removed and changed. So since I've been a councillor, this conversation around housing, homes has been something that I've advocated on behalf of since 2019. I've been asking and pushing for workshops for the council to look at what it means to review options for sensible, appropriate housing for everybody, regardless of what walk you have, what money you have or don't have in a bank account. So I'm delighted to be here tonight. I don't want to say much because everyone else has their own story to share. My role being here is to hear what your pressure points are, what it is that you want me to hear, which helps endorse me when I go back to Tasman District Council, back into chambers, and to speak on your behalf. So we know that we have had 3 workshops to try and change what is known as the 8-week rule. We haven't gained a whole lot of traction, in my personal opinion, on that. I know that the granny flat rule that is being put out there for discussion in Tasman District Council has put submissions into central government on that. And our next workshop, unfortunately, and I grieve over this, is that our next workshop has been pushed out, waiting for some conversations to come back out of Wellington around whether that granny flat minor dwelling can incorporate tiny homes and other alternative styles of housing as to the standard house that has been around for many, many centuries but actually isn't meeting everybody's needs today. So I don't want to say too much more because I know that my colleagues on the left here have more to say, but I'm here to listen. I'm here to take on board what you have to say and to continue to push and try and come up with solutions with a team of councillors over in Richmond.
Okay, great. Thank you, Trinity. Yes, yay! Trinity shows up to all the events that I run. She seems the only one who ever responds to the email that I send out. Won't somebody please respond to the needs of the community? Well, Trinity is the one. So, yeah, we're very fortunate to have her here. Yeah. Was there any questions for Trinity before we move on?
Does the council have a problem with tiny homes in general?
I'll answer for her, yes.
Why do they have a problem?
I don't know if they necessarily have a problem with tiny homes. They have a problem with legislation that they sit and they regulate, which is not flexible enough to accommodate what is now today called a tiny home. Because if you listen to some of the political conversations that have been going around, we've had tiny homes in our community for a very, very long time. The concept of a tiny home on a trailer on an axle is a new concept that, it's fair to say, some of our staff are struggling to understand how we can make that adaptable and suit the current rules that we have to operate
So
under.
if the tiny homes have been here a long time, why have we got the next and not about it now?
I might be able to explain that a little bit more.
Thank you.
Apparently Mr. Hughes would like to respond to that.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Nick. There you go. Perfect timing.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick Hughes. Firstly, I'd like to apologise to anyone that I may or may not have been in contact with in recent times and not followed up. There's been a very difficult time with me being involved with the council, and I've received some very concerning information as to my own how do I put this? I had some warnings, so I had to be a little bit quiet for a while, but I've decided that it's not worth staying quiet. So anyway, that aside, in 2019, I made the terrible mistake of purchasing a tiny home style caravan. The next morning, the council came round and said I breached the Building Act by purchasing this. When I said, well, I haven't actually built anything, I've just brought a caravan. They said, the wheels aren't on it, so it's a building. And I said, well, yes, the wheels aren't on it, it's just turned up on a truck. The wheels they left on Christchurch, they'll be here on Tuesday. No, it's attached to piles, was the next question. 3 months of battling the council and threats of abatement notices, all manner of things. They had decided that my tiny home was attached to piles and therefore I'd breached the Building Act. I finally, it was, I thought, very easy to prove that it wasn't on piles. I took the piece of wood into the council to show them that it was actually just what's called a levelling block, as anybody that has a caravan, a bus, or parks it up has to level it, otherwise things roll down the hallway. But they still decided it was a building. So a group of us got together, including a chap called Alan Dahl. And at the time, Alan Dahl and a chap called John O'Voss and a lady Daisy Smith. We were up north in Hamilton Way, Wellington, myself and Alan Dahl in Christchurch. At about this time, a new council manager had started, and a very, very intelligent man by the name of Ian Macaulay. And thanks to Ian Macaulay, my situation was finally sorted. As in, I hadn't built anything, so how can I breach the Building Act when I hadn't built anything? So Alan Dahl's case became the best case to take to court, and there was people backing Alan. And of course, you may or may not be aware, that was successfully upheld. This is the catalyst, I believe, for the issues that we're facing now, because the council can no longer go for people in tiny homes under the Building Act. It has been decided in a district court, not an environment court, not a Mickey Mouse court, in a proper court, so they've had to change the way they go about things. The Building Act has specific definitions for you to work with. For a vehicle to become a building, it has to be both immobile and being lived in permanently, not one or the other. We also have a decision tree to decide whether or not something is a vehicle or a building. But of course, they've lost that argument. Almost straight away, the council came back to me, you're living in it. But they had to ask the question, are you living in it? Well, I was more fortunate, well, my wife and I were more fortunate, that we didn't actually need to live in this. I own a house. So I was able to hold them to account, so to speak. And after many battles and emails, they left me alone for a while. However, during that time I went to the newspaper, and that brought out a lot of people contacted me with terrible tales. And these people really were victims, whereas I could go, all right, I'll move out today. I was moved back into the house. I was only there because of COVID, which, by the way, they kicked us out of the tiny home during COVID. And I became a person, I suppose, that people came to saying, what do I do here? And it's very moving, to say the least. And that was in 2019, 2020. I did decide at a by-election to stand for council because I thought I'd be able to make a change. I was mistaken. Being inside the tent, so to speak, is actually worse. The council spent $40,000 trying to get rid of me, insinuating that I was a bully, sort of thing. It's been a pretty tough ride for me. And that's actually made me want to fight more for the people that have come to me for help. And unfortunately, recently, council were pulling out all stops. They surveil my Facebook pages, constantly looking at everything I do. So I do have to be very careful. The great thing is now is that people are on board. Yourselves, finally the newspapers are on board. Instead of ignoring it, and coming at it from a council point of view, finally things are happening. So we need to keep this going. We need to be loud. This is the big thing. Divide and rule has been what everyone has had to endure. It's one person there, it's one person over there, it's one person there. Now we need to get together and we need to hammer them with emails. We need to contact and demand answers. Forget about, I'll send it to this person. You send it straight to Tim King, the mayor. He is our elected representative. He is the man who is in charge. He is the man that hires the CEO. He needs to listen. That is who we contact. This, by the way, everybody, is my humble opinion, and I am entitled to my humble opinion. I have to say this because I have been in trouble before for things I have said in a private capacity or in a capacity as a community board member. So just in case there is anyone here that is here to see what I've said, please respect my human rights to my personal opinion. I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Yeah, any questions?
So you're telling me that the council will come to see your caravan down in the years that had 11 whatnot was so young that they couldn't understand what files were 11
Oh, so the question, just to repeat in case you couldn't hear, it was that the council couldn't tell the difference between piles and a leveling block.
piles of concrete into the ground, 11 what's there just 11.
I couldn't possibly comment on that, but that is certainly an option if someone. I did point out to them in an email what a Brands approved pile looked like and what a piece of wood I had. Yes. They just said it's attached to piles. They ignored it. It wasn't until, as I said, a new manager came in and sorted it out. Right?
It's often said that the trouble with council starts when a neighbour starts complaining. If there's no neighbour complaining, I've actually heard this on the phone from a council employee myself. They say, well, if you do, no neighbours complaining, then I don't know about it, so you can continue on. Was this in your case a neighbour complaining?
They keep that information hidden, but I was able to find that there was a number of separate complainants. But it wasn't just about that, it was about other items, and it was pretty clear to me that council were involved. Look, I've heard some pretty awful tales from my colleague here. It has finally been admitted in court that the complainant was the investigating officer. And I have seen another case which is pretty clear because the councillor involved has said the reasons why, that the council staff happened to be on the property over some other issues and just decided, oh, we don't want that. So yeah, they might say that, but experience is showing us it depends on the circumstances. But yeah, I don't rely on the fact that it's only if a complainant, if a neighbour complains. It's just the luck of the draw, right?
So family members being in a tiny home on a property is more status than if it's a Joe Lunchbox on the property, is that correct?
Sorry?
Oh, so the question is it safer if there's family members living in the tiny home?
Well, the council actually said to me when we inquired about it initially that it was okay if a neighbour can complain or if it was for a family member.
If
No.
the tiny, you mean if the tiny home was for a
Yes.
family member?
You're still breaching the law, whether or not a family member or anybody is in it. You're allowed, of course, to have a sleep out, and that means you can have one or the other. You can have cooking facilities or a shower. You can't have both, and that has been an option for some people, that you remove one item or the other. The big thing for me, sorry people, is the resulting issues from the 8-week rule, and that is, unless the council staff member that visits you gets an admission out of you, because they don't tell you what you've broken, they come around to have a chat. And then they get you talking, and one of the questions is, oh, so how long have you been here? And you blindly, because you have no idea about this discrete piece of legislation. Oh, I've been here 18 months, and they go, oh, thank you very much, and well, we'll be back in contact with you. And then you get a letter, by your own admission, you have breached the 8-week rule. And it's all over. So people have been getting smarter in recent years, they don't open up. And so there is only one way they can prove, because in the end it goes to court, as the Shakers have unfortunately found out, they have to prove you're living in it. That means they have to put surveillance on you, one way or another. Now that can either mean approaching a neighbour, or a neighbour working with them, or, as we have found, an enforcement officer actually takes photographs or tries to video you. Now this, I can say this because it's in court documents which are publicly available. It does spring to mind, of course, the court wasn't concerned with it, but you have an enforcement officer using his phone while he's driving along at 100 kilometres an hour, trying to film a woman in a caravan. I have deep concerns with that, and I certainly hope other people will have concerns with that.
Do you have to allow them onto your property?
You have, apparently, they have a right to come onto your property.
Under what grounds?
They have legislation which backs that. I've seen the legislation. But they had to follow strict protocols with
Is
that.
it announcing first, or what kind of protocol?
Sorry?
Announcing it first?
No, they actually can just turn up.
What if you're a private and have trespass sign?
I've seen them ignore all that sort of things. That is another issue. I can understand. I've had it explained to me where if there is a serious breach, they need to inspect it to make sure it hasn't been hidden up. You know, that's their argument there. And I mean, hey, look, if someone's pouring battery acid from the Starship Enterprise down the drain on every day at 2:30 in the afternoon, yeah, perhaps someone does need to come round and go, actually, you can't do this. But to prove someone's living in a caravan, this means going round late at night. I have spoken to one person who issued a trespass notice against a enforcement officer in regards to this very thing of visiting a woman in a caravan at what he considered inappropriate times. So we've got some fairly serious issues that are sort of sublime, they're floating around underneath, which don't help this cause, which is really why we have to ask the difficult questions, and they all have to be asked to the Tasman District Council.
Why is the 8-week rule?
Why is it there?
Yeah, why does it matter? It's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 20 weeks?
I have asked that many times. The last attempt to answer it was we got it from the camping rules. So after 8 weeks, you're no longer camping, you're living somewhere permanently. And this came in when the Resource Management Act came in 1990. Personally, my investigations found that this coincided with the Appleby Domainers issue, which the council had a big problem with, right or wrong, and they didn't have any teeth to move them on. And I believe that was the first big case which council used to remove these people. Arguments both ways. You know what I mean? They weren't the perhaps the best members of the community, and certainly when they went to all four corners of the Tasman District, there were many issues. But we do have a basic human right to shelter, and I believe that this 8-week rule is in direct contravention of this. Of course, the council get around this by saying we don't evict these people. It's the landowner that does it. And it is actually the landowner, because they are the ones that get told you need resource consents. I've had everything from $1,300 mooted from council staff themselves to $20,000, and in my case it was $30,000 they wanted. And I did say, well, I just bought it because it was cool, I liked it. And I said, this could be going elsewhere very, very soon, and I have other plans for it. And but that didn't seem to matter. And when it did go, I photographed it towing down the road, but that didn't help.
With the Roger Dole case, why can that not be applied nationwide? If he won his case, and this is a few years ago,
The Alan Dole case?
or the Allen Dole, yes, right.
Yeah,
Well, why can that not be applied in a wider context?
it has. It has. The councils are no longer using the Building Act against tiny homes because they've lost. They now have to use the Resource Management Act. But here is a solution which I put to them in 2019, which to date, despite numerous attempts, they have refused to answer. I asked them, underneath the definition of the RMA use, and they call it a dwelling, which then becomes a building, which then becomes a structure. It has to be fixed to land. They've refused to answer that. And this is where Christine's case comes in.
Could you repeat that? What did you just say?
A dwelling, a building is called a dwelling slash structure in the resource management, slightly different wording. They don't actually have a specific definition. And I believe, because when they brought it in, they already had the definitions. There it is there. You've got all a proper, legally binding definition of a building that's been in place forever. And so there was no need to add to it, I suppose. But the structure has to be fitted, it has to be fixed to land, and that has been the argument which could be everyone's salvation, as long as it's not fixed to land. This protects the historic rights of everyone throughout history, gypsies,
But are you saying
Itinerants.
that now the 8-week rule negates that anyway?
The
Because the 8-week
8
rule overrides that now, because that's the
yeah, but
instead.
they call it a dwelling after 8 weeks. Then you go to the legislation that backs it, and it says it has to be fixed to land. So it was an easy answer to say, well, hey, it's all good. Yes, if you've built something, and I'm living in it for longer than 8 weeks, yes, it needs a resource consent. Or if you just brought something and put it on your property, so you haven't built it under the Building Act, I understand that if it's intended to be there permanently. But as you know, throughout history, people have lived in caravans before there were the horse-drawn carts. History has protected the rights to people to live a transient way of life until the resource management came along, which, as I understand it, a very clued up man called Mr. Dennis Bush King was, what's the word for it? He was part of the project there, so very proud of the Tasman District Council that they were able to come up with this. I've spoken with Mr. Dennis Bush King a number of times. Would like to speak to him again. He was the one that told me in a meeting, and I'm quite happy to say this, that council can have no social conscience in enforcement matters. That is also very, very concerning. This, of course, has been strongly denied by others, but I sent an email to him afterwards confirming what was said at the meeting, and I'm quite happy because he did say it, so I'm happy to sign an affidavit to that. No one has denied that. So, yes, the dark side.
They just kicked you out on the street and all that stuff.
Mr. Benjamin here has been helping people, and he is facing enforcement himself for helping said people. So the abatement notice is to your good self, not to, he is the man responsible, he is going to be the person that has to evict these people, not the council. There's no blood on their hands.
So I think we'll move then on to
Yes.
Rick's story, which will then give us some greater depth. I'm just going to move the technology here. Get that as close as possible to you now.
Right. Can everyone hear me if I speak this loud? Is that good? You hear me down the back?
What?
Okay. So our story starts probably about 2021, where I work with a building company. We've got a block of land next to the rec centre in Motueka, the sports fields, and we started off a proposal to council by actually addressing the issue and saying, can we put a tiny home village in? In hindsight, that was probably a mistake in naming it a tiny home village. So that progressed backwards and forwards. The cost of that is in the tens of thousands of dollars, and the company I was working with actually pulled out because they got to the point where they said they couldn't see a solution that we could make it work. So you can actually look in the paper and see, I think it's October 22, there was front page headlines, tiny home village proposed for Motueka. At that point in time, they had a client that needed a place to put, and my mother has a block of land which adjoins it, and she unfortunately was not well and has ended up in a rest home, which, as you know, costs a considerable amount of money. So rather than sell her block of land, we let someone move in, and that helps fund her care. And then one grew to two, which grew to three, and now four. And more recently, my sister, we're renting the house out, has also bought a little static caravan. So we got an abatement. We went about a year unnoticed on this other block of land while we were trying to seek resource consent. And then we got a visit from a lady, Mackenzie Nakai, who's not with TDC anymore, and she said, you've breached, I believe you've got illegal dwellings, illegal buildings, I think is the word, and we needed to investigate. So that went on over a year, backwards and forwards, and then she left, and we had no correspondence at all. So I thought, well, nothing's happening, we're still working out possible solutions. We'll let it go. Then we had a compliance officer come round, and he came to inspect with several other council members. There was 3 of them, and they looked around, and I said, well, the history of the land was that we used to have camper vans as the Wings member. I don't know if it's New Zealand Motor Van Caravan Van Association now. So we had the property approved in 1990 for Wings members, staying 3 nights. This is on my mother's block. And at the time, the agreement was, by handshake, that if we have a toilet in the shed and a shower and a dump station for the sewage to go into, it was all okay. And that happened for many years and no problems. And then when my father died, we stopped doing that just because sort of running it just didn't happen. So more recently, jumping forward to November last year, actually no, it was May, we had a compliance officer come round and he said, I've picked up where this case has been and you haven't acted upon any of the issues raised by TDC. And I said, well, actually, we haven't had any issues raised by TDC. It's been silent. And he said, no, you've had an email. And I said, well, no, we haven't had an email. I haven't got any copy of it. So it took 3 months, backwards and forwards, to actually find out that they hadn't sent an email because I requested a copy of it. So in February this year, we then got served an abatement notice saying that we'd failed to act on that, and that under the TRMP, the people that had lived there are classified as being there more than 8 weeks, so therefore they are in breach of the Resource Management Act and other rules. We'd also had a TDC officer and I'll name him, Rhino Botha. So he was the building compliance officer. He wrote a letter to us, having inspected, and said, I've been around, tiny homes are clearly vehicles. However, we do have one of them connected to sewage on the property via the old dump station, and the rest use composting toilets. That we pay a pan charge, so there isn't actually any. This property has no dwelling on it, but from the time of the camper vans, part of the agreement was we pay a pan charge, and so there isn't actually any freeloading of services as far as I'm concerned to the council, because that's one of the issues. They don't want people staying for free. So that abatement notice, I wrote back and I questioned how it was worded, and it got I actually asked for it to be withdrawn because I believed it was incorrect, and it then got reviewed slightly and reworded and said that we needed to apply for resource consent. So we went backwards and forwards and had some discussions, and then I tried to get the chief engineer around to see if we could, in applying for resource consent, if we could legitimise the sewage connection, because obviously applying for resource consent, you need to tick all the boxes. And one of the big issues with our previous application for 40 tiny home sites was the council will not permit any sewage connections to rural one land. That's a policy. They say that the ponds are at maximum capacity, and so only land that's been deemed to be zoned for residential use will be allowed to have a sewage connection. Unfortunately, the land that we've got is low-lying, so it's not suitable for housing. It's zoned rural 1. So our alternatives for disposing of grey water and black water are limited. We've been down the track of investigating, can we do different options. The solution proposed by the engineer is we put in big tanks and we truck it to Bess Island. We're not allowed to take it to the sewage ponds in Motueka because they're overloaded. So that becomes relatively expensive if you work out a truck for 40 tiny homes or whatever carting to Bess Island. So we've gone on and backwards and forwards, and finally in June this year, having had visits to Maureen Pugh and talked with her, and I went and had a chat with Tim King in his offices as well and outlined the issues. We managed to get the chief engineer over, and he confirmed that there is no way, even under a resource consent, that they will allow us sewage connection for tiny homes. So that now comes back to the abatement notice was then reissued, and you might have seen in the paper that on the 18th of October they had to be gone, or we had to have been applying for resource consent. So there was wording in the abatement notice that if we're seeking resource consent, it appears the matter is being processed. So I've also been told multiple times that the whole thing is due to complaints being received by neighbours. Now my immediate neighbours, we went in and we talked with them and said, do you have problems with people living next door? And when new people came in, I went and talked and I said, this is who it is. We've had some, meet the neighbours, and it's all been really good. So the immediate close neighbours are actually fine. They're all happy, and I'm in the process of getting endorsements that the current situation we have, they're all happy with. However, we live next to Thorpe Street, and my personal opinion is that we have people in big houses that are possibly feeling a bit more entitled, and I've heard directly they don't want a community on their back doorstep.
Oh, nice.
So that's just a little side to it. The next interesting thing is the camping ground regulations. So I talked with a guy called Lawrence Max, who's in Brightwater, and Lawrence actually, at the same time that we started, applied for 6 tiny homes on his rural property in Brightwater, and he has been granted consent under the rural. There's a clause you might
The
know.
cooperative living.
The cooperative living on
Land
rural
change.
one land. So I visited Lawrence. I've seen this site. It's interesting to note it took him 2 years, 140,000 of compliance, legislation, lawyers, costs, and then another 145,000 of actually developing the site. So 285,000 to get resource consent for 6 tiny home sites. That is a huge amount of money if we're going to look at having land available for tiny homes as, you know, affordable living. He's charging $250 a week for his sites, plus power.
Is that Ramsdale Road?
Yes. No, not Ramsdale. No, sorry. Sorry, it's out Brightwater up the back there. Very nice site. Anyway, so where am I at? We have 5 tiny homes. I'm sort of waiting to see what happens next. But it's very unsettling for the people that are in them, my sister included. And I went to the community board because I understood that there was workshops happening, but we haven't heard much back. So I went there. Meeting was 3 weeks ago, to actually raise the issue. Where are we actually at with council? I have said to TDC in my interactions that we want to work constructively to coming up with a solution. However, we seem to run into obstructions rather than being able to sit down around the table with tiny home builders and landowners and actually come up with a solution. Between Thorpe Street and Motueka Quay is another block of land that has been zoned future residential, rural residential. And the guy won't mind me mentioning his name, it's Martin White. Martin built my house, he was a neighbour for many years. And he has a block of land that he can't do anything with. He would like to have it as a tiny home site as well. So jointly we've done application hearings with council, had some meetings, and it's come back that it's an absolute no to any stormwater and sewerage connections. So that is actually quite a hard problem to solve, whilst we can't actually take and again the land is low lying, so we can't easily solve that. So that's where we're at, still working towards coming up with a solution, and I'm hoping that we'll see some changes led by government.
Great. Do we have any questions? Yeah.
I don't know if it will help. I asked council about the new incinerating products that have come out.
Yeah.
So, and they said I need to take it to the environmental part of the council.
Yeah.
So, yes.
That is, I believe, a good solution. We've looked at that. The problem too is your kitchen waste is treated as black water.
Yeah. Kitchen waste.
Kitchen waste is classified as black water,
If you're camping, it's classified as grey water.
not under the.
Sorry, whoever's got children, I think it's difficult for people to hear and hear, the ones that are making noise. I'm also recording this for a podcast, and so it's going to be picking up quite a lot of noises of children. So if I can just ask that, either we close the door, I guess that's one option, or that we ask the children to be quiet so that we're able to, one, have a good recording, and two, allow everybody to hear properly.
There we go. That's good.
Oh, any other questions for Rick before we move on to Christine?
Yeah, but the black water, in a camper van, the kitchen water is grey water.
Yeah.
Why not in the toilets? Any explanation?
No.
Under the.
Because why can't you use, because I know that sewage is the issue, but, you know, we live full time in a bus and we empty our tanks. So we empty them down at the airport dump station, so why cannot that be a thing for tiny homes?
It's a good point.
You know, I mean, it works, and we've done it for 6 years, and we have a grey water, which is our kitchen waste and shower waste, and we have our black water, which is our toilet waste.
Yeah.
So I don't see why there can't be a problem with taking your
No,
sea out.
that potentially is an option.
But you don't have to be plugged in, and then
No.
you're not connected to the land. It doesn't. I
So
know
then-
for a family it's a lot more.
So
but
then the
I think
issue
it's
comes back to the
yeah.
current TRMP, which says that you can't have multiple dwellings on a block of land without resource
Yeah,
consent.
that's the spot.
However, so if you read the news, September, there was an announcement, 20th September, National is moving to fast forward changes to the RMA, and by the end of this year we'll see some significant new rules. So I'm living in hope. I will say the granny flat rule, as far as I'm aware, is completely irrelevant to tiny homes. It doesn't help in any way at all.
Okay, oh wait, one more.
Yeah, sorry, excuse my ignorance. What does TRMP stand for?
Tasman Regional Management Plan, Resource Management Plan.
Okay, we're gonna move to Christine. Is there like a box or anything I can set this microphone on maybe, just because we've
Oh,
ended
here we
up
go.
with...
I'll hold it.
Oh, will you?
There we go.
All right, okay. Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, that's good. Maybe we're a little bit more towards the... Let's just get that facing, yeah. All right, there we go. Thanks. Yeah.
I'm not a very loud speaker, so I try my best, but don't mind, just raise your hands if you can't hear me, and I'll try to raise my voice. So my name is Christine, and I live with my family in the Rootery on a piece of land, Zone 1, just as Rick's land. It's a 2.3 hectares property, completely off the grid, so that means we are not connected to any public services or infrastructure like water, wastewater, or electricity. We've got solar panels, rainwater tanks, and a septic tank system. We moved in there at the end of 2020 and had our third child, and then we decided actually we would really like to share our land, given the fact that we've come from overseas, didn't have grandparents with us for our 3 children, and that this land is substantially big to look after. And if you want to go, why, then maybe putting the burden onto the neighbours is not the greatest of ideas, given that we are all having the same sort of size properties there. And we are also very cautious about, or have very strong views and values about not irreversibly changing the land, so that any possible new owner could use the land in a way that they think fit. And for us it was a no-brainer that the only really viable option would be someone coming with their tiny home on wheels, being self-sufficient. And we found that person having the same shared set of values very easily, and we were quite happy, talked to all our neighbours, shared, same as you did, said, hey, that's someone who we would like to share our land with, what do you think, this is where you want to put it. Everybody was very welcoming, very positive and engaging, had no issues raised whatsoever, so we went along with it. That was mid-2021, and now we're in 2024, and we have basically just come out of court. That was in June this year, after the CDC decided in April 2023 to apply to the Environment Court under the RMA, not the Building Act, for an enforcement order because of a breach of a zone rule, which reads using a building as a dwelling. Same thing as you have. And also because we were refusing to comply with that law. So that was the main scope of that application back in 2023. So in the hearing that took place in June, or in preparation of the hearing really, we presented the court with mainly 2 videos to put forward our view
as Zola had said, that we believe that the tiny home on wheels is not in any shape or form fixed to the land and therefore cannot become a structure, therefore cannot become a building, therefore cannot be a building used as a dwelling. And some may be a bit confused because what we hear always over and over and over again is in Tasman we have the rule when you live in something for longer than 2 months, it's deemed a building anyway automatically. Well, the problem with legislation is you have a core piece of definition. Let's say a table is a facility composed of a plate and 4 legs. So that's your main definition. And then you have kind of limbs, which could be an exemption, but not something which has a cloth on top, or not something which is blue. So you go through the definition and decide whether or not your thing is part of all these exemptions, and you check it off. Because, oh no, yes, I have a caravan, but it's lived in for a lot more than 2 months in a row. Therefore, you cannot use the exemption to your advantage. You just simply strike it out, and you're back at square one, back at the mother definition, which is something with a plate and 4 legs. And this is what we are not being told, but this district is completely not being told at all. We simply say everything that's lived in for longer than 2 months is automatically building. This is incorrect, and we know it is incorrect. We have been in court, and you go back to square one. So we were back to square one in the courts, so we presented those 2 little videos to show that we believe it's not fixed to the land in any shape or form. One video was from 2021, mid-2021, when Marianne and her tiny home arrived from the place where it was built, about 50 kilometers away, over on public roads, registered trailer with all the road safety things that you might need, lights and all these things that you may want to need. On a tow bar of a ute, 3.5 tons towing capacity, safely on our property, done. So we thought that this would emphasize that the design features of that tiny home is actually to retain movability. And the second video that we were showing, we produced for nothing else but for this court case, for the proceeding. The idea and intent for the video was merely to show that when you remove it from its location, you can do that readily, quickly, and without any injury to the object and to the land it was placed upon. So that was done within a few minutes under all the, the downpipe that catches the rainwater into a water tank, or the electrical cable, or the little pipe that fills up the container with the black water, within a few minutes hooked on, moved, and it was all good. However, even though we believed it was all good, the judge reached a different conclusion. The judge believed, after his assessment, that it is actually intended to remain permanently on the land as part of the parcel of the land. So again, we are back at square one. So we had to think, well, what is actually the requirements for those legal tests? For those who don't know, that comes from property law, and it's a very, first year law student sort of thing. If any lawyer you will ask about what does fixed to land mean, will tell you that comes from property law. It is distinction between movable and immovable property. For some it's realty versus chattel. For some it's what is attached to the title and that what you place on the land. So basically, when you move away, you would not think of uprooting the tree or the fence, but you would take your boat with you. So this is basically, in quick words, the basic distinction. Something that is fixed on your land is intended to increase the value of your land, whereas other things that are simply placed on the land are merely for the enjoyment of the property or the person who uses it or whatever. So, and this is where I struggle with most, because if one decides that is out of a sudden fixed to the land, can I simply record it on my title and say, hey, thanks Marianne for building your tiny house on my title now. If I can no longer pay the bank, maybe they want now 2 little dwellings and I just inherit it from you. Well, thanks for being with us. You know, these are all real life problems. Because what happens to you if I decide to kick you off, but keep your house and say, well, actually it's on my title now, I've paid the resource consent. Who knows? Yeah. Long story short, you just, you know, you could get rich too. Yeah, so basically it comes down to commitment and ethical values and all these kind of things. And we didn't think that the legal tests were performed properly, just so. And so we appealed the decision with the High Court, and they have just come back to us and setting a hearing for next year in February. The good news is for us, in the interim, we also applied to the High Court for a stay of the order, and that was granted. So that means Marianne can stay with us for as long as it takes the High Court to find on the matter. And that is huge relief, social, emotionally, and financially, because also, you know, there's children involved and relationships. And and the other thing that is also came with a huge relief in the last 2 weeks, the Environment Court came back to us and notifying us that they are not making a costs order yet. So they said, we are not doing that, we are waiting for the outcome of the appeal because it may affect your submissions and the positions everybody's in within the proceedings. So another big step in the, but I believe, right direction, because otherwise it would possibly mean another appeal if it wasn't in our favor. And all these kind of things, so good stuff. So that is that, and I think that's really all in the realm of structure, building, dwelling, what I can say, because it really sits now with the courts, and they are having to find on the matter and create authority, because Environment Court decisions are not binding. They are not binding to the District Court, they are not binding to the High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court. They are not binding to other Environment Court judges. And that is a real struggle, because if you had a judgment from the Environment Court, you could rely on it in your next case, as we have seen. We have in the tiny home world, we've got the Antoon case, and we have got the Beecham case. And in my personal view, there are better ways of making law, judging from the judgment. And the problem that I see is the more we accept those cases not only as guidance, but pretend they are in some shape or form authority, it's becoming increasingly difficult to have good legal outcomes. So that's what, yeah. The other issue, I think what my main issue is, apart from this whole court thing, is our dealings with the TDC ever since we have started talking about these matters, tiny homes. And I would like to start with this whole court thing, because I would like to read you something out, just to make my confusion, maybe to illustrate my confusion. This is an extract of a submission that the TDC filed 2 weeks before taking us to court. It was signed off by the mayor and the CEO in February and presented to full council 2 weeks before we were taken to court. There is an opportunity with the Natural Built Environment Bill to improve on RMA definition for structure by clarifying what fixed to land means. This would be very helpful for assessing tiny houses, especially, which we are getting a lot of inquiries on, as currently the Tasman Resource Management Plan, or TMP, definition of building refers to the RMA definition of structure, which has this fixed to land component that causes a lot of confusion. E.g., is a tiny house that has a wastewater connection fixed to the land, and therefore an RMA structure, and therefore a building, and therefore a dwelling under the TMP. Other scenarios come up regularly, like where a tiny house has a deck on the land, various types of water, electricity, phone connections, etc. So the TDC is openly admitting that they don't know what fixed to land means. They are admitting they know that we don't know what fixed to land means. They are admitting there's lots of us who don't know what fixed to land means, and we are lots that are affected by not knowing what fixed to land means, because we've got rules for you, we've got rules for you, we've got costs for you, and another set of costs for you. So, and I think that's in a nutshell my real issue of it, that there's a missing transparency, consistency across the district, and an extreme lack in respectful dealing with those people that are paying rates and living in this district. Whether it being as landowners, as residents, or a bit of both. So that, I think that's my main one. And the other one, I think some of you have already touched on it, the whole who is the complainant thing. We need to start talking honestly. In my case, I've got it in black and white. The person that made the complaint was the person that investigated it beyond complaint. The stories that you have shared with, or there was an email sent and we find out, oh, it's actually not been sent, we have the same stories. For us, there are letters, 2 letters, and we're told they were never there, they were missing, then they suddenly reappeared. Then we were quite hardliners in terms of democratic principles, right from the start. So when we received this email that everybody else receives too, oh, we have received a complaint, we simply want to go have a look and inspect your, whatever, the tiny home. We were like, no, that's not going to happen. We are private property owners and we do have private property rights. So coming back to your question, no, they are not allowed to just come onto your land as they please. And yes, if you have a trespass notice, that removes what is called the implied license of entry. This is a legal term, that's not me making it up, that's not me denying the applicability of law whatsoever. That is what it is. If you have an issue with someone coming onto your land, you can remove the implied license of entry, which does not mean there are not reasonable grounds for these people to still come onto your land. But it means that you put this extra barrier on and say, hey, before you do anything, I need to have your reasonable grounds. Please present them to me. And this is the right we have got. It does not mean we have the right to push back on everything that comes our way. You know, we've got a protected tree on the land and there's all these, you know, scientists that come on a regular basis and they check whether or not the tree's healthy, if there's enough ladybugs and all the rest of it. I don't have an issue with that. But if it's to do with a privacy matter and someone else's privacy, I'm sorry, it's not even my privacy. How dare I tell Marianne, oh, by the way, I've just received this email, could you please just open the doors from your toilet just for a tiny little re-inspection? I think that's way above what I have the right to do. And I don't think, if I don't have the right to do that, nobody else has the right from an external point of view. So if there are reasonable grounds, present them to me, tell me what the rules are and what is it exactly what you want me to do. And the next thing was that we had a very strong objection against the way in which the tools were chosen to investigate. So we've got the enforcement policy, and the enforcement policy sets out a catalogue basically of tools available that ranges from educational material, having meetings, explaining what it is that we need, what it is that you need to provide, to the strong various. Sorry, I'm clapping in everybody's direction. Yeah, so we got the tail end of it. So we got search warrant, detention, and enforcement order. And I have the impression that we got the tail end because we were very, very strongly about our wishes to have our privacy respected and not be subject to an investigation on to the cost of someone else's privacy when there's other means of doing that. We were saying, are we being under surveillance? We were saying that since March 2022. We had multiple denials. No, we are not. You are not being surveilled. Then we went to the court, and guess what? We were under surveillance. 19 months. Yeah. So we have got 3 months detailed, which is unbelievable. 65 instances in 3 months alone. Mondays to Sunday, from 6 a.m. to 10 at night. Photograph, videos, whether the boot is open, whether we have got friends there, whether or not someone can see the license plate, or whether or not the curtains are drawn, or lights are on, or all the rest of it. And it's like, woo! That's a bit interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, so I think we'll maybe have questions and maybe then we can explain anything more. Were there any questions for
Can I
Christine?
make a statement? That in the press, the legal costs for the council to go after you, they stated at $78,000.
we had 83,000.
But I asked them on the Official Information Act how much it cost to go after you, and they stated to me $61,000.
Yeah.
So they lied to me.
Yeah, this is another point that I wanted to make at the end. So
And,
what is,
and
yeah,
we're gonna go after them.
yeah, you're completely right. You know, at the beginning of this year, we asked the council in an official information act request, just as you did, could you please provide us with the number of complaints the council has been investigating over the last 10 years to do with unconsented dwelling? What was the response? We don't hold this information. So what do we read in the press? Yes, we do hold this information. It was 100 complaints in a 3-year period. We estimated that around 100 complaints in 10 years. Now it's 100 in 3 years. So this is one of the things that I want to put down to the poor elected members and say, hey, get a majority please together and work on this Logoima team, because we rely on official information being official information reliable. Yeah, we need that, and we need a majority of councillors coming on board. I mean, it's good to have 1 or 2 trying to raise an awareness, but the reality is, in the governance, you need a majority. And if the majority constantly looks away, and not my problem, by the way, it's operational, it's not governance. Well, is it? No, it's not. Taking someone to court is a governance matter. And if I point out to the council, by the way, you told me you have consulted, and you told me you have told all the elected members, however, you have no records available whatsoever. That is not in accordance with the law or your delegations register. Silence. And then I said, well, you classified this whole thing as a minor non-compliance, no action required, which means everything from coming around, from search warrant, from detention to enforcement orders, to all that was 100% discretionary. There was no statute requiring you to do anything. So I want to have the obligatory public interest test that goes along with taking people to court. That's obligatory. And I said, can you please provide it? No, it's legally privileged, therefore we are withholding it.
I'm going to give Rick, he's asked for 1 minute, and then I'm going to give us a bio break of 10 minutes. So toilets out there, you can order cake and coffee. And then what I think I'm suggesting to be the next step is that we figure out what are we going to do as a collective people in the community who care about housing for people, that we be able to work together in some way to be able to then represent to council staff and councillors to get this at a higher level. So that would be my suggestion when we come back after Rick has spoken.
Zola's actually just taken the words out of my mouth. So I was invited to come here tonight, and that's primary. I think as a group we need to work together. We have I don't know who has tiny homes here, who has land. I've always believed in being good stewards of the land. We're blessed with land, we want to share it with others. It's not actually about finances for us as much as making good use of land that's available that isn't available for any other use. So rather than me battling council on my own, and it is a battle, I really want this Trinity to take away and that we work constructively with them. And I would love to see workshops where we sit down with tiny home builders, landowners, tiny home owners, and say, we know there's a housing crisis, that's not in dispute. Tiny homes aren't the complete answer, but they certainly help, because people that own them aren't renting. So there are people that can afford a tiny home as long as there's a place to put it. Currently, the people that we have, there isn't anywhere legal for them to go. So if they get kicked out, then what? They might take up rentals. I mean, I've got 3 boys. I look for a future for them. The housing market is out of their reach. Without that, they've got friends, and I've got so many people that would love a patch of land to put a tiny home, and I get approached regularly. What's happening? Can we do it? We actually did have the Tiny Home Expo on our block. Julie Jacobson ran that. I let her use the land to try and raise awareness of it. So I want to be moving away from this positively, going, hey, I know there's rules that are going to be upheld. It's just whether those rules are correct and whether it's time to actually be having some new rules.
Things that are already underway. So then I'm happy to take suggestions or those points of, well, we're doing this and we need a group of people to join us in this, for instance. Yeah,
I would like to say something because I think one of the major issues is that we theoretically have laws in place. Protect your privacy, protect your property rights, keep the council within a confined area, but the reality is quite different from what the law says. So I think the only way we get them to change that culture is if we start to say, no, this is my boundary. Yes, they do a lot of damage to your reputation. They may come up with a label that puts you in a certain light. It does not matter. What matters is that we set boundaries. And if those boundaries are being disregarded, then they need to be held to account. There are procedures for all of it. It takes forever and a day. It's been more than 2 years now that I've been trying to get the name of the issuing officer that signed off on that search warrant. I'm miles away. But the day will come. And I think the more we are strong in our boundaries, this is what we are. I'm not doing that. Or, yes, I'm happy to do that. Then this is where things can change. You know, I start where you stop. And that's as simple as that. And the more we're stepping back because you're becoming bigger and bigger, well, the less room we give ourselves to develop. That's my take on it.
Okay. Other suggestions?
The council need to learn to have a different attitude, because they're going in with a blunt, we will force you to do such and such, instead of just asking kindly, whether how can we help you?
Mitigate problems.
And this attitude is hurting the council and your reputation before people. Now, I'm the chairman of the Tasman Community Group, and we're going to stand at full crystal councils right across this year. That's our aim. And hopefully a mayor, someone that can out. And we're looking for some names of people that would like to stand. But I think we've got to get rid of the council that are there. Okay, and tip them out with some people with a different attitude, and the people that won't go along with the staff of the council or about the council. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you for that.
Can I ask, is there anything, really I feel that it needs to be a nationwide regulation and ruling, because it feels like every council in New Zealand has different kind of approaches. So one, it might be useful if we find what some more successful councils are doing and how they've managed to do it, and try and then force Tasman Council in that direction. But the best might be nationwide, like government regulation. Touching on that, but something that kind of, it's a bit like, you know, there's kids in the playground and they're all doing their own thing, but someone has to come in, slap them around the head and tell them what to do.
Yeah, I think that this is the majority view, and people think that this is the case. The reality is this is the case, but it is not the legal case. We have got a legislation act, we have national definitions that need to be implemented across the board. One of those definitions is the famous structure fixed to the land claim. Then the question is it actually allowed for the Tasman District Council to use a definition of a building which is inconsistent with what the RMA says? Is it actually allowed for the Tasman District Council to use a building definition which is inconsistent with the Building Act and more restrictive? And these questions need to be answered. Or the question, is it actually allowed to put a human right behind a revenue? You know, do we actually have the statutes and policies that allow us to do that? Just because we are doing it doesn't actually mean anything. And we need people to, you know, stand up, speak up, and inquire with the non-elected branch about their current practices that they are exercising in this district.
And I just want to add to what Christine's saying. I think one of the things that everyone can do is actually speak up at council meetings, put more pressure on council, because the other thing is, I've been going to council meetings and listening in for probably 18 months now, and you actually can pick them up in their own language. So you can actually go and listen really hard, and then you can go and present to something that you heard them actually say. And by doing that, you're not only helping your cause, but you're actually supporting councillors that are actually trying to fight in your corner.
Yeah.
So last month at the council meeting, there was 5 people presenting, all from Mapua and Upper Moutere, and I learnt something from people that I've known for about 10 years, that what council are doing to them is disgusting. Not tiny homes, but on a property of their own. So you've got to go and you've got to listen, and you've got to have the courage to push back at them. That's just one piece of the pie. This is a whole, got lots of segments in it to actually fight this.
Do they have to be legal and cost money? You know what I mean?
What do you mean? To go
When
and
you're
talk?
fighting them, no, to fight them.
Well, no, you've got to come from so many different directions. You can't just come from one direction.
Can I say, so Zola, the topic for tonight was coming up with solutions for tiny homes, because I think that, let's not get off track. To me, I mean, I don't know how many of you have got tiny homes, or you have friends that have got tiny homes, or you want to live in one, but you want to know that you can do so, you know, safely, not hiding under the radar, and that seems to me to be the big issue. We're very public, and I've gone out there, but we're seen publicly, but I know so many sites where there's tiny homes that just quietly hide under the radar, but that's not comforting to live
Until the
hiding
drone
under the
goes
radar.
over, until they put the drones up, and
Yeah.
that's the thing.
So rather than,
Yeah.
but it's all very well standing up for rights, and I'm not, you know, I believe in having your rights, and I dislike being bullied, but there has to be a middle ground where we actually come up with some common ground. Isn't it? Where we actually achieve something, and that's what I hope we can
Well,
do.
that's what I was saying with that Whare group, the Whakatane Housing Action Reform Enthusiasts. They've got experts like people who know property, planners, engineers, so they've got people who are able to, from a professional point of view, but they're, like I said, that go-between between the community and council, so they have a good reputation with the council. It's not an against thing, they're really trying to help the council. And so they've got a number of people sitting who are meeting regularly, and then a bunch of other people who are just sort of general members. So one of my suggestions would be that we look at how the Whare is structured, you know, what are they actually doing, what have they done in terms of meeting with council, what are they requesting of council, and we use what's already working for Whakatane, and we sort of mimic that here. I'm connected to a staff member at Whakatane Council, the one that hired me to come out and help them, as well as one of the community activists who's heading of Whare. So I can, you know, make that available to us, but it does require folks, you know, to put down their name to say, okay, I'm willing to be on, you know, meet regularly to be able to discuss and take things forward. So I'm not sure how we're going to capture people's names, because was this on Humanitics or no? No. So I'm just wondering how we might like to capture people's names and what you might be interested, how you might like to help, and we come up with a catchy name like Whare. But that gives us a sense of, yeah, okay, here's our mission, and here's what we're standing for, and this is what we're working towards.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing. So I think my position is not at all against. What I'm for is we're starting with square one. You tell me what the definitions are. You tell me who you are, what's your scope, what can you do, and what I can do. I don't like to start somewhere in the middle and compromise anything in between. I think in order to achieve anything that genuinely, and not wasting your time and my time and everybody else's time, I want to know if you have an issue with environmental effects and not trying to hide revenue intentions out there, then let's start with identifying those effects and see what we can do in order to mitigate before we actually spending all that money. So I think that is engaging. I have tried to engage with our mayor since 2022, and I have not been able to get a meeting with the mayor. So some people may be able to get meetings, I didn't. So it's nothing to do with people not engaging. I tried to see the CEO, didn't work. I was not allowed.
What skills would you need to do this, Sola, to join the group? I mean, just skills, do they have to
Anybody who's got policy, working with local government would be another one. If you've worked in government or with local government, policy related or advocacy related. Comms, so to be able to speak with the media and be able to get stories out there, maybe even have a regular article in the paper. Somebody who could manage a Facebook page so that there's interaction with the public on this is what we're working towards, would you like to, if there's a petition that becomes creative, at least there's ways to move that petition. Yeah, that kind of is.
So now would you think, for example, in terms of petition, I think petition would be a good idea. Do you think it would worth putting together a petition and say, hey look, council, we are requesting from you a statement, a public statement on your website as to what are the environmental effects that you are anticipating, that you have seen, and what is your vision of mitigating and remedying these, because this is the center of the Resource Management Act. The Resource Management Act wants to have a sustainable management of resources. That's what it's all about. So, and this is the same thing as what the TMP tries to achieve. So this is where we need to be starting, and then we can understand whether or not you have got enough trees on your property or whether or not whatever. And this is when the discussion can start. So if we say, hey, could you please provide this information to us because we are paying you for that, then this could be a clear sign for the public that actually there's a willingness to engage. Without that, I'm not prepared to spend all that energy and get nowhere, because we have seen too many of these people.
Is the RMA getting overhauled? Is the RMA being overhauled?
yeah,
Is it something you kind of need to wait to see
the
what happens?
national.
Don't hold out any. What we're requiring is some action. We need something to happen now. The ball has started rolling with the media. From where I've come from, the media have come a whole long distance down the road. We need to cash in on this. My suggestion is, you're all smart people. You're here, so you're understanding what the issues are. It's election year next year, so the long-term councillors, the do as you're told, as I call them, right? This is the time you hold them to account and you put the pressure on. You put the pressure on right now. So you're all connected with people. I hope you have emails. It's very easy to type in an address. So councillors are all their names with a dot in between at tasman.govt.nz. But there is also one which is very easy. It's called Mayor and Councillors. Okay, and that means it goes to all of them. My suggestion is that something that's easy and quick for everyone to do, and you can get your friends to do it. If anyone that has an uncle, an auntie, a cousin, a grandmother, a daughter, a grandkid that might be in a tiny home or might be facing housing issues, you email your concerns. But you've probably all got separate concerns, but you've seen the idea of what's going on today. Ask questions. That's something you can do tonight. You can go off and you can ask questions of your councillors. Please don't. Trindy, Trindy, there is a couple of councillors, and Trindy is one of them, that just work their asses off. The rest of them are what I call do as you told us. They'll be happy to sit there and listen to you and tell a little story and then they wander off into the distance and you never hear from them again. To the point where if you hound them, they suddenly find something and suddenly you're a problem. We don't deal with you anymore. But you put the pressure on them. Ask the difficult questions to all these people, and if they don't reply within a week, I mean, give them a fair bit of time. Ask again. And that's something each of you can do. You don't need any help and we don't need to get organised. You can just fire away a question. And when they don't answer you, especially if you can pick up on the difficult questions, ask them, how is it fixed to land, please? How can a vehicle be fixed to land? I'm living in, and don't mention a tiny home on wheels, say, I'm living in a high-ace van. How's that?
You were the very one who said they divide and conquer. So, get together and they conquer.
Yeah,
I think we do need to get together. But I've got this very basics form. Please write your name if you would like to be included in any future communications. And then we just need a volunteer who can maybe put this into a spreadsheet. I'd be happy to use my website as a way to get information out. And yeah, that we could start with at least putting your name down if you want to be included in any sort of a list at all. And we just send out to you how might you like to be involved or informed.
So this is really like the first group that coming together of this. Sort of, it's not something that hasn't already been started, any Facebook groups or anything.
Not on the advocacy side of things.
Because my situation is I'm in a tiny house myself, and only like less than a week ago the council has approached the landowner of where I'm staying and said, we know there's a tiny house on your property and you need to talk to a planner, a land planner. So that's the situation I've just found myself in. I thought maybe this has been going on for a while, but it's new. So
How many people have had problems with the council?
We're all kind of new.
Mr.
Cindy, can
Maloney.
I ask, is there
Not yet.
kind of a concerted effort happening now that tiny houses, that people are trying to raise their head above the parapet? Is there a bit more of a concerted effort to kind of somehow knock them back, or is this always big at this level? Like, has it ramped up at all?
Well, it has ramped up, and I can say that there's some councillors, I have to be careful what I say, but there are some councillors who are giving this a lot of airtime, and we are challenging and putting questions out to the mayor and staff and senior leadership about how do we solve this problem, because it's not okay to continue to displace people in our community. So we have to come up with a solution moving forward on what we are going to do collectively. So we are having lots of, I can tell you, I think the mayor has the most physically exercised eyes in all of our chambers, because his eyes roll every time I speak, because it's always on the same topic, but we are gaining some traction. I don't sit as the only councillor sharing my concerns now.
Okay.
2019 I was.
So some have actually moved over to that side?
Yeah, we have.
Whoa. Okay.
And the more that people come to us and share their concerns, the more we strengthen our case to go.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I have proposed, and I know that I have to be careful what I say here, but I have proposed that we look at a traffic light system whereby every complaint that comes to TDC, TDC have to uplift those complaints and look into them and start to investigate. Why aren't we triaging them?
Yeah.
If you're not causing a sanitation problem, why are we not triaging these complaints until we've come up with a way to work with TRMP so as we can accommodate people in our community? Sorry, you got me going now. I'm trying to be really quiet here.
Well, I guess I'm a little bit wrong to say, well, this is the first totally public forum that we've had on this issue concerning the challenges, but there has been meetings held. It's just been more by invite, I think, to specific people working in like community-based organizations.
Industrials. Yeah.
Who are looking at the tiny home, it's more homelessness, housing and homelessness.
Yeah, so it's community wellbeing and it's focused on housing crisis, homelessness, and then youth engagement and attendance, which if you've seen the press article a couple of days ago about John Prestige, principal of Motueka High School, so he's part of our working group, and so it just shines another light on how big this problem is. So the more people that are displaced, the more families that are going to be distressed. So there has been two big hui, and like Zola said, they were invite only because it was community. The first one was community voice, which was a bit more open. The second one was ministry representatives that the ministers had put forward to come. And the idea, we were very clear, so Nick and Trinity were at that meeting as well, we were very clear that we weren't just going to sit here and talk about shit, we wanted to get shit done. And that was the very clear message at the very beginning of the meeting, and there is stuff going on in the background, but as you know with bureaucracy, very slow, and but as Nick alluded to, the media is starting to take way more notice than they have in the past. So we are getting traction, but stuff like this is so important. So yeah, thank you for organising this. But the more voices we hear, the better it supports our case. And like Trinity said, when she gets around the chamber, she can talk to all those stories, and the stories of what moves people, which is why there's possibly been a shift to support Trinity more around the chamber. So yeah.
Yeah, I think if everyone can stay anonymous, maybe we have a way for people to send in their stories to keep out their name and address, but just giving the where the challenge has been in terms of feeling insecure or actually being insecure with a notice. And then we can start to highlight, wow, we've got a lot of people, families and grandparents, and we've got all these people who are just battling to just house themselves, and yet.
Well, Nick and I are just working on a document at the moment, collating, so we're calling, people, ABC.
Okay.
So if people want to feed in their stories, you can reach out to us.
Okay.
Also, I had an interview this morning with one of the reporters who wants to run a series around the 8-week rule specifically, and is very open to anyone in situations where they've been approached by council, that he can write you in anonymously, but he would love if someone was willing to put their name forward, just to give a bit more guts. So I've got his email address too if anybody wants to reach out to him.
And how can we write to the community group?
So like Nick said, it's first name dot last name at tasman.govt.nz, and that'll just go to the individual. Or if you go on the TV website, you can find everybody's email addresses. Yeah.
But we can collectively.
You can write to the Motueka Community Board, but it will go to staff as well. So it just depends what you want seen. And we can't say which exactly staff member are getting it, but we do know that there is a new department named Governance, TDC Governance, that are getting a lot of our emails. Yeah.
And keep passing that clipboard around, because we want to make sure we get everybody's names who wants to be included on any future mailing. Oh, yes,
Oh,
sir.
yeah. Hey, I'd just like to say, everybody,
And then you, yeah. No, that's fine, go ahead.
yeah, I just think that it's helpful even just for me just to, because again, first time to deal with TDC, inquiring about my business and my land. And then how do you respond to that? Even just hearing Nick sharing or Christine sharing or Rick sharing, Judy sharing, at least we feel like we're not alone and then we know how to respond. So even if you just have a website or like a whatever page and then say, don't be afraid and this is how you respond, I ask my friends and everybody have that idea, like, oh, you do this, or you do that, you know what I mean? And I wasn't sure which one is the right approach. And then, also there's some lack of trust with TDC because you don't know what they want from you, they're just gonna snoop around and try to throw the book at you, or they seriously try to address a victim somewhere, you know what I mean? Or, spend all their resources, what they try to achieve, But then even if we just have how do you engage with the council if they approach you, and then what are our rights? So some of you don't know, I don't even know, do I have to let them in, or can I tell them to, not come in, nicely, and we don't even know. And there's things more than one people have that problem. We just been picked off, and then we're a little bit naive. We say the wrong thing, and we're saying oh, how great, and then they come back with a letter. When they appear real nice, but then they come back with a letter. It's like, oh, actually, you need to go find this, get a resource, can send that. I'm like, oh, it's not what you tell me when I see you. Is that happening? And then is that allowed in TDC? Are there an incentive to go? Oh, hey, we try to get a list of revenue thingy, out of this particular case, or are they genuinely trying to solve a problem?
Well, they don't always act legally, because I know in Whakatane that was the thing. Some staff member had illegally come in, and when the mayor found out that the staff member had done what they had said what they had said to that family in the tiny home, a lot of apologies, and it was not meant that they act like that. So yeah.
Apologies is one thing, they should have been fired.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to see. I'll have to actually see what happened to that person, whether they left or fired, or whether they were able to carry on, but yeah, it did really put a bad light onto the council, having that one person acting the way they were acting. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Right, first a small opinion request and then an observation. So what previous speaker said, I think it is good to have a platform where all the individuals can know what the best approach is, who to write to. Just like as Amnesty International does letter writing campaigns, you're so much stronger than just individual. So that's what I would love to see. But that second point is, would it be good to have a survey? Does anybody know how many people living in tiny homes, house buses, sleep outs, etc. in our region? Because if, for example, Rick is forced to evict his 4 or 5 people, that would be entirely unfair if the people in Bray Street, if they don't get evicted. And if everybody else does not get evicted, now suppose they insist on evicting Rick's tenants, then why not evict everybody? And now let's see how many people there are on the street. Because if you evict his 4, they're going to find another place, and they find another place. Now, if you know how big the problem is altogether, and you say, well, you evict my 4, but there are actually 3,000. Do you only evict 3,000? Then there's more chance of they having to front up. But we need real numbers. Do we have it? Do we know it? How would we go about getting that?
So sure, that's a conversation that we've been having at community board level and in chambers. Actually, how big is the challenge / problem? And I know there has been a voice, a very strong voice that comes to me quite regularly, who would quite like to expose lots and lots of people so as that we can get an understanding and some weighting behind when we go and face some of the conversations. My concern, and I've always fronted this, is you are going to be placing vulnerable people at risk, and I cannot protect them. I'm one voice sitting around chambers and I'm gaining momentum with other people. But if you start exposing people, I can't protect them. I can't have them come back up at mine. Like, it's a very delicate balancing act, trying to gain how big. I know that's what you're not advocating, but I'm saying there is someone else who does advocate for that stream of conversation. But I mean, how big is the problem? I don't know. I know of problems. I know of people who are having abatement notices, and I know some of their journey and what it means to them. But I am just one person that hears a bit. There's a whole lot of people in our community who wouldn't come near me because I'm that counsellor and I could expose them. Yeah?
Can we as a group do a survey like that?
I have made a survey, it's not online yet, so it's exactly examining that question. Who has got land, who has got tiny homes, who has got this, who has got a problem with that? It's done, but it's not online yet.
What numbers are you looking at? What kind of numbers?
I've been advised via second-hand information which came from a real estate agent who estimates there's in excess of 400 unconsented dwellings. So this is not just tiny homes, this is things up the Motueka Valley. Golden Bay Community Board representative told me that as much as 60% of the population of Golden Bay live in unconsented dwellings. So, look, give or take, you know what I mean? But so the source of that information is fairly realistic. They're not idiots, you know, and especially the Golden Bay representative has lived there for decades. So you would have your finger on the pulse, and it fits in with when I've gone over there. So the issue is huge, and the Tasman District Council, I believe, know it's huge, and haven't wanted to draw attention to it too much, but you do have the enforcement staff. They love their job. They are ex-police, ex-military. Their job is to enforce the law, and that's it. And they have there's a new sheriff in town, and he is the perfect candidate for being a head of that department, and he has the backing of the court to, this is what I believe there is a reason for the increase at the moment, is because they know we're good to go now, guys,
Yeah.
you know.
Have you ever had discussions within you in the council? In imagine if something is currently on appeal. You have a position that's not quite set in stone yet, and yet we have seen this surge in cases since the ruling came out in July, which is, in my view, unbelievable.
Yeah.
The number of calls that I'm getting since the end of July is just mind-blowing. The stories are always the same. It's always the same pattern. It's exactly what we have seen. Just coming around, we have noticed, we were notified, whatever the wording, it's very similar each time. So the question that I have got, and I put it down to the people, and I don't get a clear answer, have you been informed by the council that there's currently a case on appeal in the High Court, and that may affect your situation currently? I don't see that. So I think what we really need is to get the ball into the court of the council. The council needs to start making the first step, which is publishing the first step forward. Yes, we recognize there is, I don't know, a fragmentation of land issue. What do we mean by that? Yes, there may be reverse sensitivity issues. What do we mean by that? I didn't know what it means. It means possible noise complaints. And also they are concerned of increasing the traffic on the road by an additional, no, it's not a joke, it is, was said in the courts that Marianne's presence on our property increases the traffic on the road.
Yeah, traffic is one of the biggest problems.
No, it's
I mean, they're perceived.
Especially Mariana.
No.
Can't be trusted.
I think that the starting point
Once a
was
day I
we
go
need
in
to
and
get
out.
the ball rolling from the council backwards, because we can put all these resources and never ending. We need to see a commitment coming from there, not only, oh, we're postponing, we're waiting for the granny flats, oh, we're postponing, I can't do anything about the building at all.
Okay, Rick?
So I believe that the next workshop, this question was going to be asked, how big the problem is. Is that correct?
We've already asked
and
that
just
and they've refused to answer.
2 seconds. So 2 censuses ago, I worked as an enumerator. In my patch in Motueka, we can't at the time disclose the number of people living in dwellings, but it's huge. I think it was 14 homes that had in excess of 15 people when I was handing out the census forms. So when I hear from engineering that and they have one pen charge on some of those homes, that the services are overloaded, we're forgetting that this isn't just unconsented dwellings, it's actually the number of people living. So this is a bigger issue than just tiny homes and that, it's the housing crisis as such.
Why don't you just change the name? Rather than call it a tiny home, call it an unconsented dwelling.
Well, some of them can be consented though.
Exactly, but you call it a home, that means people are living in it.
If you live in a tent, it's a home though.
No, because if you live in a bus, they don't recognise that you live in a bus, but as soon as you call it a mobile home, it's a home.
No, but if you're in a tent for more than 2 months, that's a home.
That's true.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a bus, a tent, a caravan, a truck, boat, anything. You live in a casket.
What about a small?
Well, that's where the 8-week rule comes in. The 8 weeks.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you live in. It's a building after 8 weeks.
So back to Shaw's question, can we get an idea of how big the problem is? Because I think that's actually quite a critical.
We need to know how big the problem is for our community, not what's perceived to be the problem around
Numbers.
Tasman District Council chambers. Do you know what I mean? Like, that reality of what it is for our community, as in how big a challenge problem it is, could quite well be a different figure and story to what we would get given to us as councillors.
What do you mean by that, Trinity? I don't understand that.
Well, because Tasman District Council only know about the ones they know about. We know about the ones that we know, that we see, that we intentionally
Say nothing about.
We have blinkers on when we go anywhere, because I do not want to expose anybody to any more pressures, because Tasman District Council's tools that are used to manage this are very blunt and they hurt people.
Yes.
So my community will tell me how big their problem is. Tasman District Council will tell me how big they perceive it is based on the little bit that they have been exposed to by complaints more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Regardless of whom the complaint comes from.
Yeah. And of course we can't do it anonymously, can we? It has to be.
What do you mean?
You know, we can't give the real issue
Yes, we
anonymously.
Oh, yes,
Well,
we
you
can. With the
Can we?
survey.
Yeah.
Through a survey you can.
Yeah.
Well then,
Yeah.
could we not do it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Christine said she just hasn't uploaded it to where you
So
can
you have
enter,
everything
but
within a
she's-
certain region, the whole
You
region?
can put it, so I've written it in a way that you can put it through to every region in New Zealand. It's a standardized set of questions that you can answer. You just have to put in, where are you in the Tasman District Council? You may want to put in your age so that we get an idea of which sort of group you belong to for the purposes of vulnerable, not vulnerable, with a child, you know?
But are you asking, do you live in a tiny house or are you asking of any type of accommodation?
So it's trying to respond to multiple questions. It is asking whether or not you have a property to share. If you had this idea in the past, what was obstructing you? Or if you're not having a property to share, are you interested in mobile homes lifestyle, mobile lifestyle? If you were in the past, what obstructed you to pursue that further? Because you're no longer interested, because you cannot afford it, whatever. Yeah, but it's not online yet, but it's finished.
It's a huge amount of work.
Yeah, so we will put it online it's called tinymatters.org.nz. So that's just a little page. It's not a big thing, it's really just where we share our story and a little bit those rules where who has got powers of entry. And the other thing is, you know, it's always nice to have this little guide of what do you need to say, what are the rules. The problem is that the way you are being treated is probably a bit different from the way you will be treated. And so that is a huge problem and a huge reality. So if I told you, you can expect this and you're not expecting, and you are not getting treated that way, then I don't want to be feeling responsible. Because I tell people, you know, if you speak up and if you stand up, you may be treated as a criminal and you may be visited by police who detain you. Because that's just what happens.
Yeah, I hear you. And then the truth is now that the Tasman Council seems to have using a very blunt force and blunt, enforcement, not, very bluntly. How can we ramp back them? Say like, hey, you guys, there's no victim here. Control yourself,
Well,
And don't
stop
get ahead of
being
yourself.
fearful for a start. Don't have fear. You are on the side of the right side. If someone has an issue with you, they have what is called a burden of proof. If I want to go after you, then I have to prove, according to various thresholds, depending on where we are, either I've got reasonable grounds to suspect. I always use the example with, is a woman living on the property? So you have got the neighbor going past and say, well, I see purple underwear on the washing line. Well, it could be the neighbor whose washing machine is broken. It could be the male's interested in purple underwear. It could be a myriad of reasons as to why your purple underwear ends up on the washing line. But one of the reasons could be that there is a woman actually living there. But we don't really know. We have just some sort of suspicion. We have a reasonable ground to suspect. A normal person could see, yes, purple underwear could potentially mean woman living on the property. So then we have the next threshold, and that's the reasonable ground to believe. So the reasonable ground to believe is one step closer to the solution. So you have a little bit of evidence. For example, you go past every morning at 9 and you see that car coming out of the property regularly, every morning. You know that someone coming out there every single morning, and you see it looks like a female. Could be just a friend, Could be someone living in there. So you see that there's a higher likelihood that this is correct than simply having a purple piece of underwear on the washing line seen once. And this is how the whole thing works. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought. Where we start actually.
Yeah. I just want to draw attention, we did want to wrap up at 9 and it's only 6 minutes left to 9. So just to, I think, summarize where we are in terms of next steps, we've got that clipboard going around where hopefully you've written quite legibly your name and email. It's always good if you put a telephone number. I should have said that because if you can't read your handwriting, we can probably call you. It would be great to have a volunteer who's willing to write that up into a spreadsheet, and I said I'd be willing to use my, my website to at least put out, the summary of what we've done here. And you'd be willing to type that out? Okay, we'll get the clipboard then. I'll just take a photo of it. But yeah, has everybody had a chance to sign the clipboard? And I think
we
some
haven't,
people left early, but
You've all got our details anyway, haven't you?
yeah. I think, somewhere. Just to say that if you want to continue this conversation, not exactly on tiny homes, but on sharing land or other possibilities for living, there is that event on the 24th of November at Riverside, 4 to 6 p.m. You could, have side conversations on tiny home dwelling as well there. And yeah, there's my website, so if you realized, you wanted some more information, don't know who to contact, well, there's my website, commonground.net.nz. I'm not the organizer of this event, but it's just a place to go. And Christine will get that survey out so that you can put your story if you wanted to do that. But what I'm hearing is that in terms of the summary of what we said we could do, it might be some sort of a petition, which is maybe asking for some clarity. So we need to figure out what we'd be asking for. But yeah, we'd be looking for people to have input on that. I'm still of the thought that if we have a working group, a steering group made up of, 6 to 8 people with specific skills, that would be ideal, who could then interface and be a representation to council, to councilors, to be a voice to the media and that kind of thing. So again, if you sign that clipboard, we'll ask that detail if you want to sit on a working group. And then there were just other suggestions where you can attend a council meeting if you want, but that's more on your own time. I'd like to stick it to what can we do collectively with the power of people. And then I can feed back anything that's happening in that working group, because I sit on that local government policy working group, which is 17 councils from around the country. So we have that body as well too, which is the New Zealand Tiny Home Association that is running that working group. So hopefully.
Do you live here, Zola? Do you live in this area?
I live at Riverside.
Oh.
So I'm local. Yeah, so I'm around.
Sorry, can I just make one suggestion? So it feels like the working group is going to work on a long-term solution. We need something in the interim to help people like who's in her position. So that is something I think that should be a priority, and I don't know what we're going to do, but that is super important because people are living in fear, and it's unreasonable and unacceptable.
Yeah.
And I don't think the law backs
Well,
that
we
up
can.
either.
No.
One thing I can do myself is I have tried to help sort of individually a bit, and you get so caught up with that issue, you don't realise they're everywhere. You need. So Tarina and myself, Tarina, dragging me along, is becoming incredibly organised, and what I'm suggesting is that you send us your story, and absolutely anonymous, we'll send it to our own email address, just so we can use your story, and we are going to present the mayor with, hey, this is who you're hurting. They're A, B, C, and F, and G, but they are real people. What are we going to tell them, Tim? So that's something we're doing right now at the moment. So if you've got any friends, anybody you know that's got issues.
So where do we send the story?
Okay, well, we send it to. Well, no, hey, look.
Do you want to put on that piece of paper and then?
Oh, well, no, if you've got it, it's all right, and I can forward it. So, my name, Nicholas, so it's Nicholas. Dot.
N-I-C-H.
Oh, O-L-A-S.
Yeah.
Dot. H-U-G. H-E-S. 1965. @gmail.com.
Yeah.
And I will then just use the story, not anything to do with.
Yeah.
So when you don't say, "Hey, I live at 163," halfway through your blurb, you know, I'm just gonna copy and paste. So just all we're interested in is your story, and then we can we know we've got your email on our, and then from our work emails, we are then going to we're putting together a document for the mayor.
Can I just ask Trindi one question? You said that some of the councillors are changing their view. What's created that change from your perspective? Because maybe that's another way of getting to them.
We've been trying to punch them in the face.
Are you still being
I
recorded?
have been really blunt with my conversation around that I may have come from a social work background prior to becoming an elected member, and don't tell me not to use my social conscience around here, because every person sitting in chambers should have a social conscience, and every decision we make, whether it's to do with tiny homes, a stormwater pipe, whatever, we should use our own social conscience about what does that mean to us. It should prick something in us that we react to, and then interact to make a better solution for our communities. So I've done that since 2019 and slowly ploughed away. And then this term we had new councillors, so I've had to do the same conversation with them about this is who I am, and that when I sit here, I look at the lens of my community. I don't look at Trindi, I look at the lens of what my community is telling me, and I represent that. But Trindi's social conscience is pricked if she doesn't actually speak out. So when you came and spoke at council the other day, and you said to me, you come and speak in public forum, what happens to it? Well, it's up to us to find a way of opening the door to continue that conversation. Whether it gets shut by the mayor or not, we can table it. It starts pricking people's minds, and hopefully there'll be a connection from here to here, and they'll do something on it. So that's how I operate.
Last word.
Yeah,
because
sorry.
We really need to wrap up.
Yeah, okay, now all good. I can.
I'm just going to repeat your email though, because what I have is nicholas.hughes1965@gmail.com, and you
Yeah.
are the one that is collecting the stories anonymously about the challenges
Yeah.
tiny home or landowner.
Well, myself and Tarina here,
Tarina.
we're getting together. We've already got some examples, but some of these are just my historic ones. It will be excellent to have brand new ones that are happening now.
So could I just ask as a general gist, not identifying any location or anything, but kind of more or less who you are, the people affected by any decisions
Yeah,
that
I've already
affect
got-
you, the reasons, that type of thing?
We do need a location.
Oh, you do need
so
a
it doesn't need
Yeah, but not in the middle of your
like
blurb.
Upper Moutere
Oh, yes.
or Lower Moutere.
Yeah.
And any dates around things that have happened, just to give us an indication of, like, historically, because we want to try and do it as methodically as possible, to build that story.
Okay, but those dates would immediately imply that we passed the 8-week rule.
As in, like, say if you've been visited by enforcement officers or something, you say early 2023.
Okay.
Just
But
to
not
go
just
in
the general gist of we feel that we live constantly in
That,
fear of
that
being
is helpful
evicted.
too, because that is a statement we did put forward at community board meeting, that we know there's lots more people, but they wouldn't be as brave as Rick to come and present. Yeah.
Okay, well, we've gone over 9 o'clock now, so thank you that you've all stayed past that time, and that you're all so enthusiastic to help solve this problem and to support our elected folks to be able to get this more onto the board, onto the table of our council. So hopefully you've all had a chance to sign, and I will do my bit to send something out, and I'll hopefully turn this into a podcast. So you can listen to the Homefulness podcast for all other things related. I do interview Ruth, the woman of the Whakatane Housing Action Reform Enthusiast. She's on that podcast as well So if you want to hear her story and what that community is done, you can find that story there. Otherwise, yeah, thank you very much for coming, and yeah, good luck to all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.